while we were down there in Nashville, Tennessee, I wrote an article for the Guardian website with the rather provocative title of "How the Brits Invented Americana." And some of the people who corresponded below the line with it thought I was saying that we invented the blues and country, which is ridiculous. I wasn't saying that at all. Americana, as defined by the Americana Music Association, is music influenced by the roots music of America. So it doesn't even have to be American music, it's just music that's influenced by the roots music of America. And in my country in the late 1950s, there was a generation of teenagers who'd only known the Second World War and austerity. They'd grown up in a time of rationing, of candy was rationed, clothes were rationed, vinyl records were rationed. They had a shit old time. One of the few things that they glommed onto was the TV. One of the most popular TV programs was Davy Crockett, the King of the Wild Frontier. And what happened was, there was this guy called Lonnie Donegan, who was a jazzer. He was actually a jazzer, but he kind of found a way of introducing into his, there was a big, kind of among students, there was a big scene for New Orleans jazz in Britain in the sort of early 50s. And it was a particular type of jazz. Kid Ory, Bunk Johnson, the people who inspired Louis Armstrong from like 1905 to 1915, that period. They were kind of music purists, but they also wanted to play the roots music, not just the jazz from New Orleans, but they wanted to find the roots of that as well. So this guy, Lonnie Donegan, he started playing what we would recognise now as, more or less broadly speaking, as folk music, more or less Leadbelly's repertoire. Leadbelly, if you know anything about him, he didn't just play the blues, although you will find his records in the blues section, if you can find a record shop anymore. You will find his records in the blues section, but he played gospel, he played folk, he played, you know, all sorts of music. He played country songs, and this guy, Lonnie Donegan, started playing these songs at these jazz gigs. So they'd play New Orleans jazz, and they'd have a breakdown, they'd put on acoustic instruments, and play these 3-chord songs. Now, because all these students were drunk, and young, and unlike the jazz songs, the songs that Donegan was playing, like Midnight Special, they had these great sing-along choruses. So in a very short time, these breakdown sessions become more popular than the bloody jazz. So Donegan, being a smart cookie, started to do gigs where he just played these songs, and he referred to it as skiffle. Now skiffle is not, it's an American term, but it's not something that ever really was here in the US. It's basically a bunch of kids, and I'm talking about kids, I'm talking about 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old boys learning 3 chords on the guitar and playing it frantically, not just playing it gently, but playing it frantically, almost like punk rock. Here's 3 chords, form a band. And the kind of 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-olds I'm talking about are kids like George Harrison. Met Paul McCartney at the Lonnie Donegan Skiffle Club at the Cavern. Paul McCartney met John Lennon when John Lennon's skiffle band were playing a church fete in Wootton in 1957. Jimmy Page, there's footage on YouTube of Jimmy Page on telly, age 14, playing in a skiffle band in the UK on TV. And why this is significant is because what happens is these kids, when they get to 18, Chuck Berry turns up, playing a guitar like in Britain, playing a guitar like Arena Bell. These kids had already played the 3 chords necessary to play his entire repertoire. Buddy Holly too, all those great rock and roll. It's kind of like skiffle, kind of, sort of like, puts the germ of rock and roll, and not just listening to it, but playing it. And it's skiffle that gives our teenage boys just that 1 year to 18 months edge over your teenagers that leads ultimately to the British invasion. You know, that's why we were already playing Little Richard while you all were still listening to Annette Funicello. Nothing wrong with that, you know, nothing wrong with that. Because we, you know, our master plan, as always, is you know, admiring your culture and working out how to sell it back to you. And the British invasion, the blues boom, the Rolling Stones, Keith Richards, all played in skiffle bands. Even Ian McLagan from the Small Faces, keyboard player, the first instrument he ever had was a skiffle guitar. And they were terrible, horrible post-war Czechoslovakian cheese graters. They were really bad. In fact, they hurt your fingers so much you could buy a thing that went on the neck of the guitar with pads on it and buttons, and you pressed the buttons and it played the chords. It was that kind of level of entry. But it was exactly what Americana is defined as: music inspired by the roots music of the United States of America. And I'm not saying really we invented it, but I'm saying that we were the first adopters. And it's what gave us just that little bit of an edge that allowed us to come back to America and introduce a new generation of American kids to their own roots music. It's a weird way of doing it. You know, the Rolling Stones had a #1 hit with Little Red Rooster. Think about it. And this is a true story. As we're in Chicago, one very brief true story. My manager, Peter Jenner, came here as an exchange student in 1960. And being in Chicago, he wanted to find Muddy Waters. Nobody really knew where he might be playing, because he was the guys he was hanging out with. But eventually they found somewhere he was playing. He went there. It was an African-American supper club, lots of middle-class African-American people, and Muddy on stage playing sort of jazz dinner music, quietly. And them just listening to it. This is 1960. And it was only when some kids from Britain came in, and he knew that there was a blues boom going on, that he agreed to play a few blues numbers. And that was our contribution to what we now call Americana. It's a small contribution, but it's very, very important to our culture. And I wouldn't lay this shit on you without giving you an audible piece of evidence. So here's a fabulous slice of English Americana for you to take home, and check all this shit out on Google. It's all true. Don't say I don't teach you nothing, huh? Oh, when you're sitting there in your green upholstered chair, while talking to some rich folk that you know, well, I hope you won't see me in my ragged company, 'cause you know I never could stand to be alone. Take me down, little Susie, take me down. I know you think you're the queen of the underground, and you can send me dead flowers every morning. Send me dead flowers by mail. Send me dead flowers at my wedding. And I won't forget to put roses on your grave. Oh, when you're sitting back in your rose pink Cadillac, or making bets on Kentucky Derby. Yeah, we picked that song like nobody done that. I mean, I'm basement room with a needle and a spoon, and some other girl can't take my pain away. Take me down, little Susie, take me down. I know you think you're the queen of the underground, and you can send me dead flowers every morning. Send me dead flowers by mail. Send me dead flowers at my wedding. And I won't forget to put roses on your grave. Pick it for me, CJ. Three cards and the truth, brothers and sisters, yeah.